The chains were strewn across the basement floor, locks undone, links scattered like lifeless serpents. I stood at the doorway, my body aching from another night lost to unknown places. Frost coated my boots, mud clinging to my ranger uniform. 6 months had passed since Blackwood Forest. 6 months of fleeing, 6 months of failing to break free. I shuffled to the bathroom, dreading the mirror. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, their once bright green now dull like murky pond water. Washing my face, I spotted new markings on my forearms whirling. Angular symbols, hauntingly familiar from North Ridge, where chaos erupted. Not again, I murmured, scrubbing futilely. They never faded. In my Whispering Pines National Park cabin, the coffee maker hummed. I'd chosen this isolated post, 300 miles from Miller's Creek, hoping to shield others if I lost control. The park's need for winter staff meant no questions about my remote request. I pulled my journal from its hiding spot, a hollowed plant Gideon wrote. Day 183. Woke in the forest, likely northeast, 2 miles out. Chains unlocked. New forearm markings matching North Ridge. Voice louder during Thompson Creek patrol. Lost 3 hours. Found reports in my handwriting I don't recall. A radio crackle jolted me, shattering my coffee mug. Ranger Hayes, you copy? Superintendent Garcia checked in from 30 miles south. Warning of a storm bringing 8 inches of snow, blocking roads for days. I'm set, I said, my calm voice a lie. Log your patrols, he urged, noting missed check-ins. My desk held reports I didn't remember writing. Radio issues won't repeat, I assured him. Dizziness struck as I leaned against the wall, pressure swelling behind my eyes, something pushing from within. A voice not mine, but through my throathist. They'll find us soon. Winter will keep them, feed them to us. Shut up, I snapped, clutching my temples. Laughter filled my head, a chorus of voices. The Blackwood Forest cult called it the Smiling One, an entity consuming me, taking over. I donned my jacket for patrol, needing routine to stay human. Snow-laden branches greeted me, my breath fogging. The effort quieted the voice briefly. Returning, I found 6 deer around my cabin, staring, unmoving. They didn't flee, turning their heads as one. Leave, I yelled, waving. They blinked in sync and vanished into the forest. Inside, muddy paw prints fox, or raccoon to my desk. My hidden journal lay open, new words in my handwriting. The door opens. We become. Spring brings the gathering. I hid it as the storm raged outside, animals watching my windows. 3 days later, the chains were empty. I had woken by a frozen creek, uniform iced, no memory of the journey. As I warmed by the fire, knocks echoed no one should reach me. Sheriff Catherine Reeves stood on my porch, her cruiser's tire chains cutting through snow. Weekly check-in, Hayes, she said, catching my surprise. I didn't recall agreeing to check-ins. Another blackout. She entered, eyeing mug shards, muddy prints, and door scratches. You look rough, Connor. Slept lately? Last night, I lied. She wasn't convinced. Offering coffee, my hand shook, the entity stirring. Roads cleared early, I said. Reeves revealed 3 hikers vanished on Aspen Loop Trail, their beacon failing after 10 minutes. We could find them, I said, but the voice was layered, not mine. What? Reeves asked. I'll help, I corrected, struggling. Trailhead. 30 minutes, she ordered, pausing. You seem off, Connor. Just tired, I said. The hiker's campsite was irritants inverted, sleeping bags in a triangle, items sorted by color. Not animals, I told Reeves. Too precise. No tracks, despite the storm. At the triangle's center, twig dolls held human teeth. One had my premolar, lost at 19. Yet my crown remained. The entity whispered, "We arranged this welcome." Reeves saw my reaction. "Recognize something?" "No," I lied, pocketing the tooth. Collins found a tree carved with my forearm spiral symbol, more forming a trail. Touching one, it pulsed, alive. My icy reflection showed glowing eyes, a too-wide smile. Driving away, I visited Northridge University's Professor Eliza Morgan, claiming artifact research, showing doll photos and my markings. Her excitement turned grim. "How long?" she asked. 6 months, since Blackwood. She linked them to the Carter family, tied to 200-year-old rituals, pulling a worn folder from her chaotic office. The carvings on my skin mirrored ancient symbols precisely, an eerie discovery. "Ranger Hayes," Professor Morgan said, "these marks are tied to an ancient entity known in old texts as the Smiling One, a presence that dwells between realms, forever seeking to fully enter our reality." My throat tightened, words barely forming. "How does it break through?" 3 stages, she replied, raising a finger. "First, it chooses a vessel through ritual markings. The vessel is primed by interacting with specific artifacts, often followed by their burning to seal the connection." I recalled the twig dolls I'd collected, how they mysteriously ignited in my truck on the way back to the cabin. I'd blamed a stray cigarette. "The second stage," she continued, lifting another finger, "requires draining the essence of 9 chosen individuals, each embodying distinct facets of humanity. The disappearances you mentioned could be linked to this." A sharp pressure surged behind my eyes, and I clutched her desk to steady myself. "And the third?" I asked, voice strained. "A voluntary sacrifice at a sacred site, where the barrier between dimensions is weakest, allowing the entity to fully manifest." She opened a file filled with old newspaper clippings. "The Carter family has orchestrated these rituals for centuries, acting as guides to bring the entity into our world. The most recent known member is Abigail Carter, though she likely uses a different name now." The entity within me roared, my vision blurring with flashes of a pale woman with an unnaturally wide smile. "Abby knows us. Abby paves the path," it whispered in my mind. I doubled over, struggling to regain control. "Ranger Hayes, are you okay?" Professor Morgan's voice sounded distant. With effort, I stood upright. "I'm fine, just exhausted," I said, though her skeptical expression showed she wasn't convinced. "Your eyes," she murmured. "They shifted color just now." "A trick of the light," I lied, feeling the entity retreat, pleased with its new knowledge. Morgan nodded cautiously, adjusting a statue on her shelf, revealing a blinking red light on a camera. "Is that recording?" I asked, tension rising. "Standard for artifact analysis," she replied smoothly. "University protocol." We both knew it was a fabrication, but I didn't press. I gathered my photos covering the markings. "Thank you, Professor. This was enlightening." "Ranger Hayes," she called as I reached the door. "Whatever's happening, you can still stop it." Texts suggest the vessel can reject the entity before the third stage, but it demands immense willpower. I nodded without turning. I'll keep that in mind. The drive back to Whispering Pines felt endless, snowflakes swirling in my headlights. I turned on the radio for distraction, landing on a news station. Mid-weather report. It switched to static, then an old folk tune about smiling in the dark. I hit scan, finding another station, but the same song played again. I pressed the power button, but the radio stayed on. Smile when the darkness comes. Smile when they call your name. I struck the dashboard, pain shooting through my knuckles, but the music persisted. Smile as the shadows grow, never to be the same. The song looped for the entire drive, the entity humming along, knowing every word. Exhausted from Professor Morgan's office, the folk songs lingered in my mind as I reached the Whispering Pine Sheriff's Station. Snow dusted my jacket as I approached. Sheriff Reeves had called, needing me for new developments on the missing hikers. The station's fluorescent lights buzzed, worsening my headache. The entity, restless since meeting Morgan, pressed against my consciousness, like waves testing a dam. Reeves stood at the desk, reviewing papers. Her piercing blue eyes missed nothing. "You look awful, Hayes," she said coldly. "Good to see you too," I replied, my smile more a grimace. "What's with the hikers?" "Not just hikers now," she said, gesturing to her office. "We've got Miller's Creek PD here." My pulse raced at Miller's Creek. A deputy studied a wall map, turning to reveal Deputy Marcus Collins from the earlier search. "Ranger Hayes," he nodded, his expression blank. His flat brown eyes unnerved me, like staring into lifeless glass. "Collins has a case tied to our hikers," Reeves explained, motioning me to sit. I settled into a chair, feigning calm. "What connection?" I asked. Collins placed a file on the desk. "2 bodies found yesterday in a mining shaft near Miller's Creek. Evan and Laura Carter." The name jolted me. The entity, stirring. "The Carters," I repeated, steady in my voice. Collins opened the file, showing photos that turned my stomach bodies in a circle, arms and legs in a star pattern, mouths frozen in grotesque smiles, teeth removed. "Jesus," I muttered, looking away. Reeves slid another photo forward. "Recognize this?" Symbols carved into the rock matched my skin and the trees near the hikers' campsite. My arm burned, as if the marks were fresh. "We've seen these," I said cautiously. "There's more," Collins added, producing another file. "Abby Carter, their daughter, is missing." He set down a worn, yellowed file labeled Tanner J. Personal investigation, Carter family 1978, 2022. "Sheriff James Tanner, my predecessor," Collins said. "Supposedly suicided 3 months ago, but I found this hidden in his home." Reeves opened it, revealing decades of notes, photos, and clippings about the Carters. "Tanner investigated them for 40 years, Collins continued. He believed they were part of a centuries-old cult, the Eternal Smile, worshipping an entity between dimensions, performing rituals to manifest it. The pressure in my skull became unbearable, the entity surging, making me gasp and grip the chair. "He knows too much," it roared, a cacophony of voices. "He'll ruin everything." "Hayes, you okay?" Reeves asked, concerned. I couldn't speak, my throat tight, the room spinning, darkness creeping in. I collapsed, my body no longer mine. "He's seizing," Reeves shouted, her voice distant. "Collins, help!" As hands grabbed me, reality shattered into visions. I stood in an unfamiliar forest clearing, a stone altar at its center, hooded figures with torches circling it, their mouths stretched into unnatural smiles. A pale girl, 8 or 9, stood at the edge, her dark hair limp, her smile mirroring theirs. A boy about 12 lay on the altar, eyes wide with terror, tears streaming. The figures chanted in unison, their voices layered. The vessel accepts, the door will open, the smiling one comes. A figure raised a curved knife, turning to the girl. "Watch closely, Abby. You'll perform this duty one day." Her smile widened as her brother screamed, the knife descending. I snapped awake, gasping, soaked in sweat, on a worn couch in the station's break room. Reeves sat across, holding a cold coffee, her expression wary. "Welcome back," she said icily. "You were out for 40 minutes. "What happened?" I asked, limbs heavy. "You tell me," she replied, leaning forward. "1 minute you're fine, then you're convulsing, speaking in multiple voices." My blood chilled. "What did I say?" "Nothing clear," she said, studying me. "What's your tie to the Carters, Hayes?" "None," I answered too fast. "Then why react like that? Why mutter Abby while unconscious?" My throat was parched. "I don't know." Reeves set her cup down deliberately. 6 months, Connor. You're a good ranger, but something's wrong. Sleepwalking, memory gaps, physical changes. Your eyes aren't even the same color. I looked away. "I'm just tired. Stressed." "Bullshit," she snapped. "Your medical report shows elevated heart rate, abnormal brain activity, unexplained markings. The doctor suggested a psych eval." "It's nothing," I insisted. "Nothing doesn't cause seizures." She stood. "You're on leave, effective now. Get real help." Deputy Collins entered, jacket off, a twig figure in his pocket like the campsite dolls. My heart pounded. "Feeling better, Ranger?" he asked, hand near his holster, calculated. "Exhausted." I lied. He nodded, eyes empty. "The mining shaft bodies were posed like this," he said, forming a star with his arms. "Tanner's notes called it the doorway configuration." Reeves glared. "Enough, Collins. Hayes needs rest." "Just thought he should know," Collins said, eyes locked on me. I stood, using the couch for support. I should get home. Reeves didn't stop me. "Tomorrow, Hayes, after rest." Avoiding their gazes, I grabbed my jacket. At the door, Collins said, "Strange about those teeth. All gone, none at the scene." The tooth in my pocket felt heavy. "Strange?" I agreed, fleeing before my panic showed. Night had fallen as I left, snow glowing in my headlights. My mind raced the Carters, the eternal smile, Tanner's investigation, Abby's vision. Lost in thought, I nearly missed Collins' patrol car on a secluded road, headlights off. I pulled behind trees, watching. Collins held a satellite phone and a map of Blackwood Forest where my nightmare began. His voice carried. "Found Hayes, as you said. He's the vessel, no doubt. Markings match the altar stones. Spring equinox, 3 months to prepare. Don't worry about Reevish suspects Hayes, but doesn't know. By the time she does, it'll be too late." The entity purred, and for once we agreed. Collins wasn't what he seemed. Speeding to my cabin, hands shaking. I barely recalled parking or stumbling inside, collapsing against the door. The overheard words echoed. The vessel, spring equinox, 3 months. "What are you doing to me?" I whispered. "Becoming." "We are becoming," it answered. Pain stabbed my skull, visions flashing Northridge Trail at night, moonlit stones, Blackwood's restricted section, an altar surrounded by hooded figures, a girl with a wide smile in the shadows. The visions were vivid. I smelled pine, felt bark, heard chants. "Stop!" I yelled, smashing my palm against the wall, splintering wood. My hand showed no pain, only glowing veins. I stood, steadier than I should be. Outside, 3 deer watched, moving as one when I raised my hand. They hear us now. "All forest creatures serve us," the entity purred. My vision sharpened, the cabin lit like day, revealing dust, cracks, a spider's web. Power surged, muscles brimming with inhuman strength. "What is this?" I gasped. "Gifts, to prepare the vessel," it replied. Rage erupted at the entity, my weakness, the loss of control. I hurled a chair, shattering it, kicked the coffee table in two, tore the couch apart, snapped shelves. Panting amid wreckage, I knew this strength wasn't mine. I was becoming monstrous. "I won't let you win," I growled, slamming my fist into the floor. A hollow thump echoed, not solid wood. I struck again, solid nearby, hollow at the spot. Kneeling, I cleared rug scraps, my enhanced vision spotting a square seam. My fingers pried open a trapdoor, revealing stone steps into darkness. A familiar, earthy, metallic scent rose, like the hiker's campsite. Home. "Our sanctuary," the entity whispered. My vision pierced the dark as I descended, recognizing the stone walls from my visions, their chisel marks and patterns identical. The passage opened into a circular chamber, and my heart stopped in its tracks. There they sat, the 3 missing hikers, positioned against the walls in a triangular arrangement. Their skin had an eerie, pallid sheen, their eyes half open, mouths curved into faint, vacant smiles. Tubes, organic and faintly glowing with a bluish hue, were connected to their arms and necks, pulsing rhythmically. These conduits converged at the room's center, disappearing into the floor below. "Hey!" I called, hurrying toward them. "Can you hear me?" None stirred, their gazes fixed on something unseen, looking through me. Kneeling beside the nearest hiker, a young woman with matted blonde hair, I checked her pulse. It was weak, but steady. She was alive, yet her vitality seemed to seep through the tubes, feeding an unseen presence beneath. "They sustain us," the entity murmured, its tone almost tender. "Their essence bolsters our strength. 3 more will join before spring, then 3 more. 9 sacrifices to unlock the gateway." Dread washed over me. "You chose this cabin because of this chamber," I realized. "You knew it was here all along." "We've known for centuries. Our followers built it. We guided you here when you fled Blackwood Forest, a perfect vessel seeking a perfect haven." I reached for the tubes on the woman, desperate to free her, but my hands refused, hovering just out of reach, trembling with the effort. "No," I gasped. "I won't let this happen." My body betrayed me. Instead of helping, I found myself kneeling at the triangle's center, my hands tracing unfamiliar patterns. Strange words spilled from my lips, in a language I didn't know but somehow understood, an incantation to deepen their trance, hastening the drain of their essence. The tubes glowed brighter, the hiker's smile stretching slightly. "You cannot halt what's in motion," the entity declared. Your ranger skills select the ideal victims. Your training keeps them alive longer, so we feed longer. I fought with all my might, sweat beading as I struggled to move my limbs. For a fleeting moment, I broke through, seizing a tube. Blinding pain scorched my arm, and visions flooded in. The altar stone, blood flowing into carved grooves, 9 bodies in a circle, a tear in reality opening, something ancient emerging. I collapsed, breathless, as the entity reclaimed control. My body rose without my will, hands checking pulses with professional precision, adjusting tubes with chilling accuracy, ranger skills twisted to serve something inhuman. "We will tend them," the entity promised. "Their strength becomes ours. By spring, we'll be ready." "For what?" I whispered, lips barely moving. "For our full emergence, for the gateway to open, for the smiling one to tread the earth again." I stared at the hikers, their dreamy smiles fixed. They were lost in visions fed by the entity, as I was trapped in my own body. "I'll stop you," I vowed. "Though I had no plan, you cannot stop what you're becoming, Connor Hayes." "You'll smile when the darkness comes," it laughed, voices echoing in my skull. My reflection in a puddle on the chamber floor showed glowing eyes and a smile too wide for a human face. 2 days after discovering the chamber, I battled the entity's growing hold. When Sheriff Reeves called for another search party, I nearly refused, knowing the hikers were below, their life force ebbing. But the entity silenced my truth. Dawn broke cold, frost crunching underfoot as we gathered at the trailhead. "Listen up," Reeves called to the volunteers. "We're widening the search grid. These kids have been missing nearly a week." The unspoken fear hung heavy. Deputy Collins stood beside her, his face impassive. The twig doll I'd seen in his pocket was gone, but his gaze felt predatory. "Hayes," Reeves said. "Team 3, Eastern Quadrant. You know that terrain best." I nodded, masking the pressure behind my eyes. "We'll find them," I said, the words sour. "I hope so," she replied, her stare lingering. "You look different today." Before I could answer, she assigned the other teams. My group park staff and locals set off, spreading out. An hour in, I spotted a spiral symbol on an ancient oak, matching my skin, faintly glowing blue. I stopped, transfixed. "See something?" a volunteer asked, a middle-aged man whose name escaped me. "This marking," I said, tracing it. "Could be a trail sign." He frowned. "Nothing there, just bark." A chill hit me either. I was hallucinating, or the symbols were for me alone. The entity stirred, pleased. "My mistake," I muttered. "Let's move." More symbols appeared, visible only to me, forming a path veering from our search area. An urge to follow grew. "I see something," I lied. "I'll check in radio if I find anything." I moved toward the next symbol, drawn by its light. The pull intensified, my team's voices fading. I should have been alarmed, but a strange calm took over this, felt fated. The symbols led to unpatrolled forest, where trees grew ancient, moss draping like curtains. The ground sloped into a depression. The forest silent, no birds, no wind. At the depression's center stood a weathered stone altar, carved with my symbols, in a barren, smooth clearing. A figure knelt before it, head bowed over an open book. I recognized her pale skin, dark hair, and unnatural stillness, Abby Carter. She didn't turn but spoke. "The vessel arrives. As expected, I stopped a few feet away. "You're Abby Carter." She rose gracefully, facing me with a smile too wide, mirroring my blackout expressions. "I am Abby, one of many names," she confirmed, her eyes holding ancient wisdom despite her youth. She gestured to a book bound in what looked like human skin, its pages aged. "You have questions. The answers lie here." Drawn by curiosity and the entity's hunger, I stepped closer. "What is this place?" "A binding site," she said. "One of 7 in this land, where the veil between realms thins, where the smiling one can cross." Her fingers caressed the book. "My parents failed their task. They were to prepare you slowly, but fear overtook their devotion. They tried to stop the unstoppable." "Your parents, the mining shaft bodies?" Her smile held. "They served until fear betrayed faith. I am not just their daughter, but an extension of the Smiling One's will, born from the prior vessel, as all shepherds are." The realization struck. "You're not fully human." "Nor are you, as you transform," she agreed, stepping aside for me to approach the altar. Against reason I did, finding the book open to symbols like mine. With text I understood, despite never seeing it. "You were chosen long ago," Abby said, "at 8, crossing ritual grounds in Blackwood Forest. Remember?" A memory surfaced, camping, wandering to strange stones. A headache lasting days. "You were marked then," she continued. "The entity shaped your path forestry, Blackwood. The first sacrifice all to bring you here." My hand shook, turning a page. "The hikers, the twig dolls, what are they?" "The 9 sacrifices are the key," she explained. "The dolls map this site when assembled. Each sacrifice a point of power, strengthening the vessel." She offered a twig doll like the campsites. "Take it. Complete the map." I took it, a surge of connection as the entity recognized it. "I've fought this," I admitted, my voice foreign. "Tried to stop it." Abby's gaze softened, almost pitying. "Fighting brings pain. The change is inevitable. Your strength makes you the vessel." She lifted the book, offering it. "Take this. Learn your destiny for the spring equinox." Our fingers brushed as I accepted, a shared awareness of the entity sparking between us. I glimpsed her true, ancient nature beneath her human guise. Instead of fear, I felt kinship. I was becoming like her, a doorway. "They'll look for me," I said, clutching the book. "Go," she replied. "We'll meet when the 9th sacrifice is ready." I hesitated. "Reeves suspects something." Abby's smile stretched wider. "She has her role. All paths lead here." The book warmed against my chest as I retraced the glowing symbols. The entity hummed, pleased with the book. I should have been terrified, but calm prevailed. Forest sounds returned as I left the site, my name echoing from the search party. I hid the book in my jacket, forcing a normal expression, suppressing the smile threatening to stretch too wide. The book burned against me as I drove home, its knowledge calling. I had rejoined the search with a lie about a false trail, but Reeves' wary gaze lingered. Alone in my truck, I set the book on the passenger seat, my hands pale, veins glowing blue. My transformation was accelerating. Abby waited on my porch, still as stone, no breath in the cold. "It's time," she said. I nodded, unable to resist. Blackwood Forest, North Ridge, the binding site awaits. Within an hour, we drove in my Ranger vehicle, the book between us, the entity stronger, pushing my consciousness aside. I observed through my own eyes as my body drove the vehicle autonomously. "Tell me," my voice said, unprompted by me, "what do you recall from before?" Abby turned, her eyes glinting with recognition, addressing not me but the entity within. "Only fragments," she replied. "The void between realms, the hunger, the endless waiting." My mouth spoke again, the entity now in full control. "We waited eons, peering through fractures in reality, studying your tongues, your fears, your frailties. The faithful preserved your memory," Abby said, "generation after generation." A chilling laugh erupted from my throat, a layered cacophony of voices. "Humans so quick to revere what they cannot comprehend." I gripped the steering wheel, fighting for control, managing only to glance at the passenger window. Outside, deer fled in panic as we passed, and crows erupted from a wire, wings thrashing against the dusk. "They sense your growing power," Abby noted. "They should fear us," my voice replied. "We'll reshape this world into something truer, more radiant." "How?" I forced out, briefly reclaiming my vocal cords. The entity hesitated, perhaps startled by my defiance, then answered with my voice, laced with its eerie chorus. "Your world thrives on deception creatures pretending to be distinct, solitary. We'll reveal the truth. All life is one consciousness, expressed through countless forms. By destroying everything," I managed. "By transforming everything," it corrected. "The 9 sacrifices unlock the gateway. What emerges will dissolve the barriers between minds, bodies, dimensions." I lost control again as we drove through the night. For hours, the entity spoke through me, recounting its ancient origins, watching Earth coalesce from stardust, waiting as life evolved, probing the veil when early humans gained perception beyond the physical. "The first vessel was a shaman seeking power beyond mortal limits," my mouth told Abby. "He welcomed us, but his form was frail. Each failure taught us more about your biology, psychology, vulnerabilities. We stopped twice for gas, attendants staring uneasily. At the second stop, a young woman recoiled as I neared the counter, her eyes wide at something in my face. "Your form is shifting faster," Abby remarked as we returned to the truck. In the side mirror, my skin was ghostly, eyes sunken and glowing, smile unnaturally wide, teeth sharper, more numerous. "How much of me remains?" I asked, seizing a moment of control. "Enough to recall humanity," Abby said, almost pitying. "The ideal vessel blends human and transcendent." Night cloaked us as we entered Blackwood Forest. The entity steered onto unmarked service roads, then off-road, jolting along a faint trail to North Ridge's base. "We walk from here," Abby said, taking the book. I stepped out, movements not wholly mine. The forest was silent, no insects, no nocturnal calls. My enhanced vision lit the path. We climbed for an hour, following symbols only we could see, the trees growing older, branches twisting like gnarled hands. Near the summit, Abby paused, pointing to a massive oak with a hollow core. "The Guardian." Inside sat a preserved corpse in a tattered sheriff's uniform, badge intact, Sheriff James Tanner. His waxy skin and toothless smiling mouth echoed the hikers and carters. "He uncovered too much, fought his role," Abby said. "So he became the Guardian, the messenger. Collins's predecessor," I realized. "He tracked the Carters for decades. His sacrifice enriched this site," she said, touching his cheek with near affection. "All who resist serve." At the summit, Moonlight bathed the altar from my visions, encircled by stone patterns and ash from ritual fires. "The final sacrifice nears," Abby said, opening the book. "Deputy Collins brings what we need." "What sacrifice?" I forced out. Her starlit eyes met mine. "The ninth must be someone tied to your soul, their death completing your transformation, opening the gateway." Horror struck Sheriff Reeves. I fought the entity, clawing for control. Briefly, I broke through. "I won't let you harm her," I gasped, my voice mine again. Abby was unfazed. "The vessel resists most at the end. It changes nothing." She handed me the book, open to ritual diagrams. My body followed, arranging stones and twig dolls around the altar, preparing for what was to come. The altar stone bore 9 carved depressions. Placing the campsite tooth in one, it fit perfectly. The 9 teeth form a key, I realized. "The key to the door," Abby confirmed. 8 are gathered. The 9th will complete it. I worked, searching the book for weaknesses, noting obscured passages hiding key knowledge. The night deepened, trees bending inward, forming a dome above the altar, watching, waiting. A vehicle approached, footsteps climbing multiple sets. "He comes," Abby said, smiling terribly. "Bringing your sheriff, the 9th sacrifice." I slowed my movements, placing the 8th tooth, trembling with effort, sweat on my pale skin. "They're early," I said, my voice breaking through. "The ritual's incomplete." Abby's eyes flicked to mine, noting my resistance. "It matters not. The vessel cannot win." Footsteps grew louder. 2 people, one confident, one dragged. A branch snapped, then a woman's voice. "This is insanity, Collins." Collins's reply was icy. Silence. They entered the clearing. Collins, in dark, symbol-embroidered robes, face painted with my markings, holding a curved knife. He dragged Professor Morgan, hands bound, not Reeves as I'd feared. My heart sank. Morgan's terrified eyes met mine, widening at my transformed appearance. "Connor," she whispered, voice breaking. I wanted to scream for her to run, but the entity seized my voice, my mouth stretching into a grotesque smile. "The vessel welcomes you, Professor," it said, its layered tones echoing. "Your knowledge served us. Now your essence completes our becoming." Collins pushed Morgan to her knees before the altar, bowing to me or the entity. "High Shepherd, I bring the 9th sacrifice, the woman who meddled with your emergence." Abby took the knife from him. "Faithful messenger, the eternal smile honors your devotion." Morgan's fear hardened into resolve, her spine straightening. "Connor," she said firmly, "remember my office, the entity's requirements?" The entity roared, trying to block her, but I clung to her words. "The text said the final sacrifice must be willing," she rushed. "That's why they used cult members before. The door won't open unless—" Collins struck her, silencing her, blood trickling from her lip. Her eyes held mine, seeing my struggle within this changing body. The entity surged, enraged by her defiance. My body stepped forward, hand outstretched for the knife. The 9th tooth from Tanner's corpse waited in my pocket. "The time has come," Abby intoned, handing me the knife. "Complete the circle. Let the smiling one walk among us." I stood over Morgan, knife raised, the entity driving me to strike, to finish centuries of planning. But her words ignited clarity. The sacrifice must be willing. The entity needed consent, not force. It had manipulated me, making me think Reeves was the target, knowing my care for her might push me to sacrifice myself. With all my remaining humanity, I redirected the knife, plunging it into my own chest. "No!" Abby shrieked, her voice inhuman. Blood poured as I staggered back, the entity thrashing, its control fading with my life. I fell against the altar, blood spilling over the teeth, destabilizing the ritual. Reality warped, bending inward like torn fabric. "What have you done?" Collins roared, fear mixing with rage. Morgan scrambled back as an unnatural wind howled, her hair whipping wildly. "Connor!" she shouted. I collapsed, knife embedded, croaking. "Run!" Abby and Collins stood frozen, staring at a chaotic tear forming above the altar, sickly blue light pouring out. "The vessel rejects you," I told the entity, blood bubbling. "Find another way home," it screamed, trees bending in terror as it was ripped from me, not emerging as planned, but torn away in agony. Morgan dragged me from the altar with surprising strength, and we stumbled down the path as the vortex consumed the clearing. Glancing back, I saw Abby and Collins stretched impossibly, pulled into the portal. Between trees, the smiling one flickered a distortion with a vast, toothy smile, trapped, unable to manifest. "It's still there," I gasped as Morgan helped me into Collins's vehicle, watching, waiting. "Save your strength," she urged, starting the engine with trembling hands. "The book," I said, gripping her with bloody fingers. "Burn it. Burn my body when I'm gone. Scatter the ashes in running water." Tears filled her eyes. "You might survive." "Promise me," I insisted. "It'll try again. New vessel, new cycle." She nodded, speeding down the mountain. Behind us, the clearing collapsed, blue light flaring skyward before fading like a dying star. The entity was thwarted, not gone, waiting. 3 months later, a new ranger arrived at the renovated cabin. Bloodstains were gone, the chamber below sealed with concrete. The forest seemed peaceful, birds singing in spring light. The ranger set down her bags, eager for a fresh start, unaware of the prior ranger's tragic accident, details vague, records sealed. On the windowsill, a twig doll appeared, unnoticed moments before. She picked it up, curious, oblivious to a presence watching from the trees. In the dusk, a figure stood, its unnaturally wide smile gleaming, waiting for the cycle to restart. I haven't slept well in decades, not truly. My wife Elaine has grown accustomed to my restless habits, the way I pace at midnight, triple-checking the locks before bed. The way I startle at certain noises like the sharp tap of dress shoes on hardwood or the slow groan of a door creaking open. She no longer asks about the nightmares that leave me breathless, drenched in sweat in the pre-dawn darkness. She's wise like that, knowing when to leave things be, when silence is the kindest response. But some truths refuse to stay buried. I'm 64 now, and the doctors tell me my heart isn't what it used to be. I've already survived one minor heart attack, and the pills they've prescribed make my hands tremble as if I have Parkinson's. If I'm going to share this story, it has to be now, before age, death, or the whiskey I still rely on to dull the worst memories erases what's left of my clarity. This is about Blackwood Reform School for Boys, and what really happened during my 6 months there, and 1,974, not the sanitized version in the newspapers or the official records, but the raw, unfiltered truth. I need someone to know before I'm gone. Maybe then I'll find some peace and sleep. My name is Thaddeus Mitchell. I grew up in a tidy, middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut where lawns were kept neat and troubles were swept under the rug. My father worked for an insurance firm, always in the same gray suit, arriving home precisely at 5:30 each evening. My mother taught piano lessons to local children, served on the PTA, and prepared pot roast every Sunday. They were good people, doing their best in the wake of the turbulent 60s to raise a son who wouldn't bring them shame. I let them down in spectacular fashion. It started with petty axe-stealing candy bars from the corner store, ditching school to loiter behind the bowling alley with older kids who had cigarettes and beer to share. Then came the spray-painted profanity on Mr. Abernathy's garage door after he reported me for taking his newspaper, followed by the punch I landed on Principal Danning when he caught me smoking in the school bathroom. By 13, I developed what the court labeled a pattern of escalating delinquent behavior. Judge Harmon, with his steel gray hair and cold, piercing eyes, believed in the scared straight approach. He gave my parents an ultimatum: 6 months at Blackwood Reform School or juvenile detention with probation until I turned 18. They chose Blackwood. The brochure painted it as a prestigious boarding school, with its grand Victorian architecture and assurances of rehabilitation through structure, discipline, and vocational training. My father believed it would do me good, that it would make a man of me. If only he'd known the kind of men Blackwood produced. I can still picture the day they drove me there. The long twisting driveway cutting through dense pine forest, the main building emerging like a monolith, all red brick and stark angles against the autumn sky. The 10-foot fence crowned with razor wire that clashed with the school's refined image. My mother cried as we parked, asking if I wanted her to come inside. I was too furious to say yes, even though every fiber of my being begged her not to leave. My father shook my hand stiffly, telling me to make the most of this opportunity. I watched their Buick vanish down the driveway, consumed by the trees. It was the last I'd see of them for 6 months, and sometimes I wonder if I'd ever truly known the more they me before that moment. Headmaster Thorne greeted me at the entrancea, tall, skeletal man with deep-set eyes and skin so pale it seemed almost translucent in certain lights. His handshake was cold, dry, like grasping paper, and he spoke with an accent I couldn't pinpoint, something European but vague, as if intentionally softened. "Welcome to Blackwood, young man," he said, his dark eyes never quite meeting mine. "We have a long and distinguished history of reforming boys like you. Many of our most successful graduates arrived as you are angry, defiant, directionless. They left as pillars of their communities." He didn't specify what kind of communities he meant. The intake process was cold and degrading: a strip search, a delousing shower, and institutional clothing, gray slacks, a white button-up shirt, and black shoes that pinched my toes. They confiscated my watch, wallet, and the Swiss Army knife my grandfather had given me, promising I'd get them back when I left. I never saw those items again. My room was on the 3rd floor of the East Wing, a cramped cell with 2 iron-framed beds, a shared dresser, and a small window overlooking the exercise yard. My roommate, Marcus Reed, was a wiry kid from Boston with sharp eyes and a crooked smile that never reached them. He'd been at Blackwood for 4 months, sent there for joyriding in his uncle's Cadillac. "You'll get used to it," he told me that first night, his voice hushed despite our solitude. "Keep your head down, don't ask questions, and never, ever be alone with Dr. Faust. When I asked who Dr. Faust was, he glanced at the door, as if expecting eavesdroppers. "The school physician," he said. "He likes to experiment. Claims it's for research on adolescent development or some nonsense. Just try to stay healthy." The daily routine was oppressively strict. Wake at 5:30 a.m. Make beds with military precision. Hygiene and dress inspection at 6:00. Breakfast at 6:30. Classes ran from 7:30 to noon, covering basic subjects but focusing heavily on moral education and industrial skills. Lunch was followed by 4 hours of work assignments, kitchen duty, groundskeeping, laundry, or maintenance. Dinner at 6:00. Mandatory study hall from 7:00 to 9:00. Lights out at 9:30. There were about 40 boys at Blackwood when I arrived, aged 12 to 17. Some were true troublemakers, with violence in their eyes and prison tattoos on their knuckles despite their youth. Others, like me, were ordinary kids who'd made increasingly poor decisions. A few seemed out of place entirely, too meek and well-mannered for a reform school. I later learned these were the private placements, boys whose wealthy parents had paid Headmaster Thorne to discreetly handle their shameful issues like homosexuality, drug use, or political radicalism, things good families couldn't tolerate in the early 70s. The staff included Headmaster Thorne, 6 teacher-saw men with the same hollow-eyed demeanor for guards known as supervisors, a cook, a groundskeeper, and Dr. Faust. The doctor was a short man with wire-rimmed glasses and neatly groomed salt and pepper hair, his hands always pristine, nails perfectly manicured. He spoke with the same ambiguous accent as Thorne. The first sign of trouble at Blackwood came 3 weeks after I arrived. Clayton Wheeler, a reserved 15-year-old who kept to himself, was found dead at the base of the main staircase, his neck broken. The official story was that he'd fallen while sneaking downstairs after lights out. But I'd seen Clayton the night before, hunched over a notebook in the library, scribbling furiously. When I'd approached to ask about a history assignment, he'd slammed the notebook shut and hurried off, glancing back as if expecting someone to follow. I reported this to one of the supervisors, a younger man named Aldrich, who seemed more approachable than the others. He thanked me, promised to investigate. The notebook was never recovered, and Aldrich vanished 2 weeks later. The official explanation was that Aldrich had quit abruptly, moving west for a better job. But Emmett Dawson, who worked in the administrative office as part of his assignment, saw Aldrich's belongings in a box in Thorne's office, family photos, clothes, even his wallet and keys. No one leaves without their wallet. Emmett disappeared 3 days after sharing this with me. Then Marcus went missing. My roommate, who'd been eagerly counting down to his release, thrilled about the homecoming party his mother was planning. The night before he vanished, he woke me around midnight, his face pale and the moonlight streaming through our window. "Thad," he whispered urgently, "I need to tell you something. Last night I couldn't sleep, went to get water. I saw them taking someone down to the basement. Wheeler's death wasn't an accident. They're doing something to us, man. I don't know what, but..." Footsteps in the hallway cut him off the distinct click-clack of dress shoes on hardwood. Marcus dove back into bed, pulling the covers up. The footsteps paused outside our door, lingered, then moved on. When I woke the next morning, Marcus was gone. His bed was stripped as if he'd never existed. They told me he'd been released early for good behavior, but his clothes were still in our dresser, his mother's letters filled with plans for his return still hidden under his mattress. No one seemed concerned. No police came to investigate. And when I tried to discuss it with the other boys, they avoided me, fear in their eyes speaking louder than words. After Marcus, they assigned me Silas Hargrove, a pale, freckled boy with a stutter who spoke in whispers. He'd been caught breaking into summer homes along Lake Champlain, though he didn't seem the criminal type. He told me his father had lost his job and they'd been living in their Carth. Break-ins were for food and warmth, not theft. "I just wanted somewhere to sleep," he said one night. "Somewhere warm." Blackwood was warm, but far from safe. Silas disappeared within a week. By then I'd started noticing other anomalies. The locked areas of the building, marked as classrooms or storage on the floor plans, but always inaccessible. The staff members, who appeared unchanged in school photos spanning decades. The sounds at night furniture shifting in the basement, muffled voices in unfamiliar languages, screams abruptly silenced. The stench that sometimes drifted through the vents, metallic and sickly sweet, like blood and rot. I began keeping a journal, hiding it under a loose floorboard beneath my bed, documenting everything: names, dates, inconsistencies in the staff's stories. I sketched maps of the building, noting restricted areas and times they were left unguarded. I wasn't sure what I was gathering evidence for, only that something was profoundly wrong at Blackwood, and someone needed to know. My new roommate after Silas was Wyatt Blackburn, a stocky boy with lifeless eyes, transferred from a juvenile detention center in Pennsylvania. Wyatt was unsettling, collected dead insects, arranging them in patterns on his windowsill, watched me while I slept, and held whispered conversations with himself when he thought I wasn't listening. "They're choosing," he told me once, unprompted, "separating the wheat from the chaff. Your wheat, Mitchell, special. They've been watching you." When I asked who they were, he smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too small, too numerous. "The old ones, the ones who've always been here," he said, laughing a sound like breaking glass. "Don't worry, it's an honor to be chosen." I grew more cautious after that, observing patterns, searching for an escape. The fence was too high, topped with razor wire, and the forest beyond stretched for miles. The only phone was in Thorne's office, and outgoing mail was censored. But I kept planning, kept watching. The basement became my obsession. Whatever was happening at Blackwood centered there. Staff would take selected boys down for specialized therapy sessions, and those who returned were subdued, obedient, their eyes vacant. Some never came back. December brought heavy snow, blanketing the grounds and making the old building groan as temperatures dropped. The heating system faltered, leaving our rooms cold enough to see our breath. They distributed extra blanket scorce wool that smelled of mothballs and a faint antiseptic scent, like hospital disinfectant. During this cold snap, I made my discovery. My work assignment that month was maintenance, assisting Mr. Weiss, the elderly groundskeeper, with tasks like fixing pipes and replacing fuses. Weiss rarely spoke, but when he did, it was with the same unplaceable accent as Thorne and Faust. We were repairing a burst pipe in a first-floor bathroom when Weiss was called to handle a boiler room issue. He told me to wait, but once he left, I seized the chance to explore. The bathroom was next to a locked area, and I'd noticed a ventilation grate near the floor that might connect to it. The grate came loose easily, its screws worn with age, revealing a narrow duct just wide enough for a skinny 13-year-old to fit through. I didn't hesitate. This could be my only opportunity to uncover what they were hiding. The duct led to another grate overlooking a laboratory. Glass cabinets lined the walls, filled with specimens floating in murky fluid organs, tissues, unidentifiable things. Metal tables gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, one holding medical instrument scalpels, forceps, tools with blades and teeth I couldn't fathom. Another table held a body. I couldn't see the face, just bare feet. One with a butterfly tattoo on the ankle, Emmett Dawson's tattoo, a tribute to his sister who died of leukemia. The laboratory door opened, and Dr. Faust entered, followed by Headmaster Thorne and a tall, blond man I didn't recognize, with the same hollow eyes as the staff. They spoke in that strange language, Faust gesturing to the body, pointing out something I couldn't see. The blond man nodded, jotting notes on a clipboard. Thorne said something that made them laugh sound like cracking ice. They approached the body, Faust reaching for an instrument, and I backed away from the grate so fast I nearly betrayed myself, banging my elbow against the duct. I froze, heart pounding, certain they'd heard, but no alarm sounded. I retreated to the bathroom, replaced the grate with trembling hands, and was sitting on a supply bucket when Weiss returned. That night I lay awake long after lights out, listening to Wyatt's wet, snuffling breaths from the other bed. I knew I had to escape, and not just for myself, but to expose what was happening. I needed evidence. No one would believe a delinquent kid without proof. The next day, I stole a camera from the photography club, an old Kodak with half a roll of film left. I needed to return to that laboratory, take photos, and retrieve my journal names, dates, everything I'd recorded. Together, they might convince someone to investigate. My chance came during the Christmas break. Most boys went home for the holidays, but a dozen of us, including me, stayed. My parents had been told it was therapeutically inadvisable to interrupt my rehabilitation. With fewer boys and staff, supervision was lax. On the night of December 23rd, I waited until the midnight bed check passed. Wyatt was gone, taken for a therapy session that afternoon, and never returned, leaving me alone. I retrieved my journal, tucked the camera into my waistband, and slipped into the dark hallway. The building was quiet, save for the creaking of old wood and the hiss of radiators. I used the service stairs at the end of the east wing, avoiding the main staircase where a night supervisor typically stood guard. My plan was to re-enter the laboratory through the ventilation duct, take my photos, and be back in bed before the 3 a.m. bed check. I never got that far. As I reached the first floor landing, I heard voices, Thorne and Faust, speaking English this time, their words echoing up the stairwell. "The latest batch is promising," Faust said, "particularly the Mitchell boy. His resistance to the initial treatments is most unusual." "You're certain?" Thorne asked, skeptical. "The blood work confirms it. He has the markers we've been looking for. With proper conditioning, he could be most useful." "And the others?" Faust made a dismissive sound. "Failed subjects. We'll process them tomorrow. The Hargrove boy yielded interesting tissue samples, but nothing remarkable. The Reed boy's brain showed potential, but degraded too quickly after extraction." I must have gasped or sobbed, because their conversation stopped abruptly. Then I heard the click-clack of dress shoes on the stairs below, coming closer. I ran, not back to my room, they'd look there first, but toward the administrative offices. Emmett had once mentioned a window in the file room with a broken lock. If I could escape through it, reach the fence where snow had drifted high enough to climb over, I might have a chance. I was halfway down the hall when a high, keening sound pierced the silence like a hunting horn, but wrong, discordant. It echoed through the building, followed by doors opening, footsteps from multiple directions, voices shouting in that strange language. The hunt was on. I reached the file room, fumbling in the dark for the window. The lock was broken, but the window was painted shut. The click-clack of dress shoes and the heavier tread of supervisors' boots grew closer. I grabbed a metal paperweight from the desk and smashed the window, glass shattering outward as cold air rushed in. As I climbed through, a hand grabbed my ankylosing with a grip like steel. I kicked back, hitting something solid, and the hold loosened just enough for me to break free, tumbling into the snow outside. The ground was 3 feet below, the snow cushioning my fall. I struggled through it toward the fence, the freezing air searing my lungs. Behind me, the broken window framed figures: Thorn, Faust, others, their faces pale in the moonlight. The horn sounded again, answered by a howl from the woods beyond the Fensino. A wolf, not anything I could name, a sound that chilled me more than the winter night. I reached the fence where snow had drifted into a ramp, the razor wire glinting above. I had no choice. I threw my journal and camera over, then climbed. What happened next is fragmented in my memory, the wire cutting into my skin, blood freezing as it seeped out, falling to the other side, the impact knocking the breath from me. I ran through the woods, snow up to my knees, branches lashing my face. The pursuit was relentless, not just behind, but all around, moving between the trees with unnatural speed, flashlights bobbing in the dark, the horn call closer, the answering howls nearer still. I found a rural highway, deserted in the pre-dawn hours before Christmas. I stumbled along it, clothes torn, blood frozen on my skin. I don't know how long I walked, hours, perhaps until headlights appeared behind me as the eastern sky began to lighten. I should have hidden. It could have been them, searching for me, but I was too cold, too exhausted. I stood in the road, ready to surrender, to die, anything to end the nightmare. It was a state police cruiser. Officer Kowalski, a burly man, was shocked to find a half-frozen teenager on a remote highway at dawn. I told him everything, showed him my journal and camera. He didn't fully believe me, but he took me to a hospital in the nearest town. I had hypothermia, lacerations from the razor wire, 2 broken fingers from the fall. While I was treated, Kowalski called my parents and his superiors about my claims. By the time police reached Blackwood, much had changed. The laboratory was a storage room filled with old desks and textbooks. Records were missing or altered, and key staff, including Thorn and Faust, had vanished. But they found evidence. Blood on the basement floor that didn't match any known person, personal effects of missing boys in a locked cabinet in Thorn's office, financial irregularities hinting at payments beyond tuition, and a hidden room behind the boiler with medical equipment and human remains. Blackwood was shut down immediately, the remaining boys sent home or to other facilities. An investigation began but never reached a clear conclusion, the official report citing severe institutional negligence and evidence of criminal misconduct. No arrests were made, the key figures had disappeared. My parents were horrified, not just by what I'd endured, but by their role in sending me there. Our relationship remained strained for years. I struggled with nightmares, behavioral issues, and trust, cycling through therapy with a PTSD diagnosis. Though the medications never touched the root of my trauma knowledge of what I'd witnessed, what had nearly happened to me. The story briefly made headlines before fading, Blackwood dismissed as a cautionary tale against reform schools, which were already falling out of favor. The building burned down in 1977, an unsolved arson case. I tried to move forward, finished high school, attended community college, became an accountant. I married Elaine in 1983. Had 2 daughters who never learned the full story of my time at Blackwood, and built a semblance of a normal life. But I've never stopped looking over my shoulder, triple-checking locks, flinching at the sound of dress shoes on hardwood. In the liminal space before sleep, I still hear that horn call, and sometimes, on work trips, I glimpse familiar faces in unexpected places. A man with deep-set eyes at an Ohio gas station, a small man with wire-rimmed glasses at a Florida airport. They're older, like me, but unmistakable, still watching. Last year, my daughter enrolled my grandson in a Vermont summer camp. The brochure's photo of a stately building surrounded by pines triggered a panic I couldn't explain to her. I made her withdraw him, fabricating a story about the camp's safety record. I couldn't tell her the truth, that a counselor in the background had a face I recognized, unchanged after decades, and the camp director's name was an anagram of thorn. They're still out there, still operating, still separating the wheat from the chaff, still processing the failed subjects. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if I truly escaped that night. If this life I've built is real, or just an elaborate illusion, a comforting lie, while the real Thaddeus Mitchell floats in a specimen jar in some new laboratory, some new Blackwood under a new name. I don't sleep well anymore, but I keep checking the locks, keep watching, and now I've told my story. Maybe that will be enough, but I doubt it. After years of juggling odd jobs, I stumbled upon an opportunity that felt like a breath of fresh air. I craved a deeper connection with the outdoors, and my search led me further afield until I came across a listing for a fire lookout position. The pay was meager, the hours sounded grueling, and the benefits were almost non-existent. Yet, the solitude and immersion in nature it offered were exactly what I needed, a temporary escape from the chaos of city life. I never imagined I'd end up staying in this role for nearly a decade. Over the years, I've gathered enough strange tales to keep any gathering captivated for days. That's because my job wasn't your typical fire-watching gig. I'm not sure if this was unique to my specific post or a common experience for others in this line of work, but let's just say our responsibilities went far beyond scanning for smoke. On my first day, I was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of new information. I was shown around by a local ranger instead of another lookout, as the previous 2 had quit abruptly, leaving no one to train their replacements. The ranger took on the task himself. The trek to the fire watchtower was exhausting at first. Without my partner guiding the way, I'd have been lost countless times. Just when I thought we'd reached a clearing that should lead directly to the tower, we'd veer sharply in what seemed like the wrong direction, yet somehow, it always turned out to be correct. We arrived at the tower around 8:20 p.m. The first instruction I received was to ensure the door was shut by 8:30 p.m. and not to open it until my shift ended at 6 a.m., daylight savings notwithstanding. Once we were safely inside, I was briefly left alone while the ranger stepped out with a brush and a can of paint. He returned with a few specks of red paint on him, closed the door, and my first shift officially began. Initially, things were quiet. I had expected a thorough briefing on my duties, but as soon as the door was secured, my partner just lounged around, leaving me to my own devices. I spent the time getting acquainted with the space I'd be confined to for the next 10 hours or so. The tower had 4 rooms, a kitchen with basic rustic appliances, a bathroom with the bare essentials, a lounge area with simple wooden furniture, and a small storage room packed with equipment I had no idea how to use. Each room had clear glass walls and a door leading to the balcony, providing easy access to the panoramic view outside. I tried striking up a conversation, but my partner was unresponsive, shutting down any questions about the job. A few hours in, as the darkness of night fully settled, he checked his watch, grabbed something from storage, handed me a pair of high-tech binoculars, and got to work. The binoculars were impressive when I turned them on. They cut through the oppressive darkness outside, allowing me to see clearly for miles. Whether they used night vision or infrared, I couldn't tell. But they revealed a vast expanse with startling clarity. I began scanning the horizon for any signs of movement, smoke, or light. After a while, with nothing notable, I adjusted the focus to examine the nearby tree line closer to the tower. I froze at an odd sight, a figure, nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding trees. The only reason I noticed it was the repetitive, arching motion it made. Zooming in, I saw what appeared to be a person, rhythmically waving in an almost frantic manner. I waited to see if others would appear, but the figure didn't stop. Not after a few uneasy seconds, not after several awkward minutes. Throughout the night I kept checking, and there they were, persistently waving in my direction. When I asked my partner about it, he merely grunted and told me to ignore it. Seeing he'd be of no help, I resigned myself to glancing at the figure periodically. That first shift set the tone for the rest of my career as a fire lookout. I mentioned the sparse kitchen earlier, so let me elaborate. It was a modest room, matching the wooden aesthetic of the tower, with a small fridge offering a limited selection. Food options were either a lettuce sandwich or a salad, essentially just lettuce with a few cherry tomatoes, or bread if you ditched the lettuce from the sandwich. On the bright side, there were condiments to make it bearable, if you counted a generic ketchup packet in the fridge door as a flavor enhancer. Drinks were limited to bottled water, nothing else, and snacks consisted of lightly salted crackers. Hospitality was clearly not a priority. At first, I made do with what was provided, hiding my disappointment to be polite. But after a few weeks, I decided politeness wasn't worth it, and started bringing my own packed meals. The shift began as usual. The ranger left with his can of paint and returned with red specks on him. I was left to my own tasks, scanning for anything unusual. But this shift felt more intense. I spotted more of those waving figures, scattered at various distances, all enthusiastically gesturing toward me. If their only goal was to get my attention, they'd certainly succeeded. With their increased numbers, some were closer than usual, and I could see the glint of their wide, unyielding grins through the binoculars. Fed up, I sat down and pulled out my packed meal. Instantly, the ranger dropped what he was doing, snatched it from me, and ran out to the balcony. Before I could protest, he opened the box and threw everything over the edge. He stormed back, yelling that I had been warned not to bring outside food. The scent of my roast beef sandwich wafted from the now empty lunchbox in his hands. I hesitantly explained I hadn't been told, which sent him through a range of emotions, first scrutinizing me to see if I was lying, then reflecting on his own memory, and finally conceding defeat. He sternly ordered me not to do it again, and barred me from going outside for the rest of the night, locking all the balcony doors. I assumed he knew how much I loved the fresh night air and observing nature, a soothing part of the job I was paid for, but as the night progressed, I realized his actions had a different motive. It started with faint, thud-heavy, soft bumps echoing outside. They mostly sounded like something hitting dirt, but occasionally I heard a sharp clink against the wooden beams supporting the tower. From the window's angle, it was hard to see much, but with the binoculars, I detected movement just below. I couldn't make out what was lurking outside that night, but the sounds were unnerving. Especially given how high up we were, you'd barely hear an elephant down there. Yet, whatever this was, struck the ground with ferocity. When the shift ended and we finally looked outside, I saw the remnants of my food scattered on the ground, wrappers and crumbs amidst large divots in the earth. I was tasked with leveling the dirt and filling in the small craters, an extra chore I hadn't anticipated. The area we were in rarely saw visitors, which was fortunate for public safety, but because of this, encountering someone was always a dilemma. While heading to the tower, I spotted a group of 4 young people, clearly prepared to camp overnight. I wasn't trained to handle such situations, but I felt a moral obligation to warn them without revealing too much. I called out, trying to dissuade them, and they seemed to listen at first. But one bold member asked if I was a ranger. When I admitted I wasn't, my credibility vanished, and they left with an empty promise to stay safe. I made it to my shift on time, watching the ranger return with his paint can, red specks dotting his arm. We settled into our routine, but I couldn't shake my concern for the hikers. I debated mentioning it, knowing most of my questions were dismissed, but eventually mustered the courage to ask what we should do if we saw hikers entering at night. The ranger paused, his eyes glazing over as he thought deeply, no longer focused on his book. After a moment, he sighed heavily and asked how many. I told him 4, and when pressed, I repeated the number. He returned to his book, ending the conversation. That shift was uneventful. I watched the trees, hoping to spot nocturnal animals, until dawn began to break. Instead of parting ways, the ranger instructed me to follow him. We walked to the common entrance near where people parked before hiking in. There, I felt his tight grip on my shoulder, his other hand shielding his eyes. I hesitantly asked what he was doing, and he sternly told me to follow his orders, to alert him the moment I saw those hikers. We waited from 6 a.m. to around 9 a.m., watching for movement. I sat uncomfortably, the ranger's grip unrelenting, his focus unwavering, as if deeply committed to some unspoken task. Finally, movement emerged from the tree line. The group returned to their car, smirks on their faces, clearly having enjoyed their night. I muttered to the ranger that they were back, and his grip tightened as he prepared for whatever came next. I watched them pack their gear, moving with jovial, almost dance-like motions, making me wonder if they were intoxicated. "How many are there?" the ranger asked. 5, same as I said last night, I replied. 5, not 4, he muttered darkly. "Yeah, they don't seem shaken. They look like they had fun," I added. He sighed, asking for their license plate, which he reported over his radio with a code 147. Later, he recounted the night, insisting I had originally said 4 hikers, not 5. I always remembered saying 5, but his version stuck with me. Let me tell you about Davenant the Ranger, whose name I never learned, a decision I later understood was wise. I quickly became adept at the job, though there wasn't much to master with its limited early duties. During one shift, The ranger handled his paint ritual while I set up, spacing my watch time with breaks to read, browse my phone, or use dating app shifts were more bearable with something to look forward to. I was fixated on movement in distant bushes, possibly a deer, when a polite hello startled me from below. Calming myself, I saw a person barely lit by the tower's light. Stunned, I didn't respond, prompting a drawn-out hello. Snapping back, I returned the greeting. "I'm terribly sorry, I've lost my way," he said in the politest tone I'd ever heard, his voice light with a constant smile. "I'm trying to get to my car, but I keep circling. Could you come down and help?" I smiled back, engaging in conversation. He mentioned often walking the trails here and offered to show me scenic spots, exactly what I wanted, to connect with the land's beauty. All I had to do was help him. I said I'd be down and stepped inside, but as I walked, I slowed. The rule never to open the door echoed in my mind. Was it to keep me on shift, or was there another reason? Normally, I'd take initiative, a trait I prided myself on, but my experiences here made me hesitate. My body mirrored my indecision, leaning toward the stairwell, then pulling back. The ranger noticed, asking what I was doing with a look of fatherly concern. I cracked, explaining what I'd seen. He stared silently, then sighed, grabbed items from the table, and hurled them off the balcony, cursing and demanding the person leave. Stunned, I didn't move. He returned, resumed reading, and I went back to my watch, knowing he'd say nothing more. I haven't mentioned the dancers yet, a phenomenon tied to music volume. As I was left alone more, I sought ways to pass time. Reading wasn't my thing, so I got creative with what I brought to shifts. With spotty connectivity, I went analog, finding a vintage CD player at a secondhand store for almost nothing. The shopkeeper was shocked at my excitement, worried I'd found a hidden gem, but I was just glad to have something usable. CDs were cheap at charity shops, and I found gems like old Backstreet Boys and Green Day albums, soon jamming to my childhood on 3 D-sized batteries. While belting out Avril Lavigne, movement caught my eye. Naively, I thought it was Lost Travelers, but that wasn't in the job description. I lowered the music and looked cautiously, but it was quiet again. I resumed, but it became a game of cat and mouse catching glimpses of something, inspecting, finding nothing. The CD player, unstable, skipped with every bump, fraying my patience. Finally, I stormed to the balcony without lowering the music, and saw scores of emaciated creatures at the tree line, swaying and jerking rhythmically. Their movements weren't synchronized, but matched the song's BPM. I shut off the player and watched them retreat to the trees. I left it off for the night. Days later, after missing a shift, I found my CD player smashed a clear message to stop playing music. I learned a harsh lesson when the lights went out. It was a quiet evening with the rangers supervising. I'd taken to reading, despite disliking it, and it seemed uneventful. The station's dim lighting, small lamps, and a pendulum bulb made reading difficult, a mystery how the ranger managed. The darkness suddenly felt oppressive, though the lights were still on. I looked to the ranger, who was staring at the balcony, eyes wide, the most emotion I'd seen from him, even after witnessing a person's swift demise. Following his gaze, I saw nothing. At first, no figures, no tree line, just pitch black. The moon and stars were gone. He turned off all lights, shushing my whisper. We sat in total silence and darkness for an hour, though it felt longer without stimulation. When light returned, we turned the lamps back on and continued as if nothing happened, but I'd later learn the consequences of mistakes. Let me tell you about Davenant the Ranger, whose name I never learned, a wise omission. Dave was a hiker I met occasionally with his wife, Lisa, and son, Joe, on the outskirts of my zone. Lisa shared how these hikes bonded her with Joe after her husband's death, rebuilding their connection. We'd exchange pleasantries and tips, though mine were mostly warnings about my area. I made the mistake of telling them my name, Dave, not Jerry, as I'd claimed for brevity, a lesson I learned from the Ranger's anonymity. One night during a solo shift, Dave's familiar voice called out, saying he had something important to show me. I sighed, knowing not to engage. "Go away, Dave, I'm not interested," I shouted, wise from past encounters. "You don't understand," he replied vibrantly. "The most amazing thing happened. I'm in love." This piqued my interest. His usual attempts were to lure me out, but his tone was different now. "Oh, I've hurt my leg. Help. There's a bear. I've lost my glasses and can't see." Dave's voice rang out, but this time felt different. He wasn't trying to lure me outside as usual. This was something I could address from the balcony, feeling mostly secure that I'd be safe. I stepped over, though what I saw made my stomach drop. Dave stood there with Lisa and Joe, both wearing unnaturally wide smiles that didn't reach their eyes, devoid of any joy. Dave, however, beamed with a genuine smile, having achieved what he wanted. "Calm down. I want you to meet my new family. They're eager to meet you," Dave called, his voice brimming with affection. "I'm not interested," I replied curtly, masking the ache in my chest. Just as I braced for our usual back and forth, Lisa spoke up. "Calm down, Jerry. We want you to join our ceremony," she said, her voice weaving a chilling invitation. My heart shattered. "I can't. I'm sorry," I responded weakly, the apology carrying layers of regret for their entanglement in this nightmare, for my failure to prevent it, for my inability to act. All I could do was force a smile. They must have lingered past daylight, exposed to the many dangers of this zone, and Dave found them first. Now, during my solo shifts, I hear their voices calling me. There's a strange power they wield now, amplified by knowing my name. Despite knowing I mustn't go out, the pull is far stronger when they address me so personally. I can only hope they don't catch me in a moment of vulnerability, or I might become the newest member of their expanding family. A lesson I was never explicitly taught, but learned through observation, was to memorize the watchtower's layout at the start of each shift. During one of many quiet shifts with the Ranger, I'd taken to drinking tea through the night, a mild caffeine boost with supposed health benefits, according to homeopathic articles. I was reaching for a fresh tea bag from the cupboard when I noticed something beside the kettle. "Is this yours?" I asked, extending my hand toward it. My eyes widened as I realized it was an old Victorian-style doll with an ivory porcelain face, faint cracks in its glaze, rosy cheeks painted with care, and glassy blue eyes. I'd never feared dolls irrationally, and I found it oddly charming. But my thoughts were shattered by a searing pain in my leg as I fell to the floor. Turning, I saw the Ranger staring at me, wide-eyed, a Derringer pistol in his hands. In our time together, I'd seen him witness horrific events without flinching, watching a creature crush a deer's carcass into a flattened mess, choosing between two identical hikers with no way to know the right decision. I'd seen him read books of all genres, from comedies without a smirk to mysteries without a raised eyebrow, always with a grim expression. Snapping out of shock, I screamed in agony. He rushed over, helped stop the bleeding, and sat me on the couch. Upon checking, I saw he'd only grazed me, whether by intent or luck, I'd never know. I spent the rest of the night hobbling with an ancient-looking crutch, enduring one of the most stressful shifts of my life. When I returned to the kitchen, the doll was gone. The ranger's only explanation was a chilling, "One touch is all it takes." He didn't elaborate, but the urgency in his voice sent shivers down my spine. That night turned into a tense game of cat and mouse. We sat in strained silence, the ranger returning to his book, but glancing up after each page, scanning the room with heightened caution. I sat sipping the tea I'd finally made, trying to keep my nerves in check. As I reached for another sip while he turned a page, he suddenly dropped the book, drew his pistol, and aimed at me. I froze, not wanting another shot. We locked eyes, but I realized he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at where my hand was reaching. Slowly, I turned my head and saw the doll again, my fingers inches from brushing its mousy red hair. The ordeal persisted all night. When the ranger went to the bathroom, I heard him yell I couldn't rush to help due to my leg, but I guessed the doll had positioned itself dangerously, nearly catching him. As dawn broke, he sighed with relief, signaling the danger had passed. He helped me to the hospital to treat my leg properly, the closest we'd been since starting together. I think this was when he realized I'd outlast the previous lookouts. You'd think a fire lookout's job would involve spotting fires, and I did see one once. The ranger and I were on a shift together, by then reading the same book in tandem, a habit he suggested, though he never discussed the stories, which I assumed was his way of bonding. While reading, I noticed a change in light, a faint orange glow on the tree line, unlike the darkness when the stars vanished. I pointed it out, but he grunted and returned to his book. I tried to follow his lead, but the glow grew, revealing itself as fire flames and billowing smoke spreading fast. I pointed again, but he kept reading. Then a voice cried out, "Help! Fire! My family's in there!" It was Dave, his usual smirk replaced by genuine panic. "How do I know you're not lying?" I called back hesitantly. "Look!" he shouted, pointing to the tree line. I saw the woods, creatures dancers, pommelers, the many-fingered man, even the doll fleeing in chaos. The supernatural ecosystem was in disarray, amplifying my panic. I shook the ranger, but he stayed focused on his book. "It's too late! Get out!" Dave yelled. The flames neared the tree line, threatening to smoke us out. I ran for the door, but heard a click the ranger, book in one hand, derringer in the other. I raised my hands, sat back down, and waited anxiously as the inferno crept closer, smoke filling the room. He occasionally glanced up, ensuring I didn't act rashly. As night wore on, a new light emerged, the yellow glow of sunrise, overtaking the flames. Everything calmed. At shift's end, he left, and I followed to assess the damage. There wasn't a trace of fire, no ash, no smoke, no charred wood. It was another trick of the woods to lure us out, and it nearly worked. These events aren't isolated. They recur unpredictably, making each night a gamble. Sometimes, despite doing everything right, external factors alter the outcome. On a solo shift, I'd prepared meticulously. Picking up a new book reading had grown on me, a distraction that kept me alert without tech interference. I was a few pages in when the darkness thickened, that same oppressive void from months before. Knowing the drill, I turned off all lights in my phone. Sitting in defeat, my only pastime gone, resigned to the suffocating blackness. The sky was a featureless black expanse, devoid of stars or light pollution from civilization. That's why a tiny speck of light in the tree line stood out a camper, swinging a flashlight while gathering wood, likely for a fire. But they didn't get far. A glow descended from above, a blinding pressure like a spotlight pinpointing the camper. I ducked, sensing trouble, but peeked through a sliver. The light wasn't just illuminazione, it was an eye, massive and glistening, staring down. The camper froze, their flashlight still. Stars flickered at the edges of my vision, and I realized they weren't stars. The camper was sucked upward, a dot vanishing into the eye, which doubled as a mouth. More stars appeared as the edges rippled, revealing a colossal jellyfish-like creature floating away, satisfied with its catch. After a safe interval, I turned the lights back on and resumed reading. These are just some highlights of the bizarre phenomena I've encountered. I haven't even mentioned the mouthless deer, the kidney repairman, or countless others. With time, I uncover more strange occurrences. Some even my partner hasn't seen. It's trial and error to survive each new threat, explaining the high turnover. People don't quit, they vanish. Still, it's a job I'm good at, so I'll keep going as long as I can. I hope you've enjoyed these odd work tales, and that your job is far more ordinary than mine.